I have 16 possible views on my screen. Is that a new enhancement for Zoom?
Okay, so you're live.
We're live on my end as well.
Good evening and welcome to the Warwick Public School Committee virtual meeting for Tuesday, October 20th, 2020. Pursuant to Executive Order number 2005 issued by the Governor of the State of Rhode Island, this meeting will be conducted by electronic communication only. Members of the public wishing to access this meeting may do so at https://YOUTU B as in boy, E/Z, the letter O, FMA, T as in Tom, J as in June, 0, Z, R, G as in go. This time I call a meeting to order. We vote to go into closed session for discussion and/or action regarding those items of business exempt from open meetings under general laws of Rhode Island, 42, 46-5, A1, A2, A4, A8, and A9.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. We're in executive.
Okay. You took my screen.
Kathy, I'll sign out now, right?
Wait a minute.
We don't have the little thing yet.
Are we in a room yet?
No, we don't have a
Not
little
yet.
breakout room thing yet.
Okay, hold on.
There we go.
Pardon?
It's there now. Did you get it?
You have a different,
I don't have it yet.
I've got to use, okay, Karen.
I'm still waiting on my end.
Are you bringing us in, Kathy?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. I was looking to go in. I was looking for the door.
Need to assign you though. You have different. Let me go to.
You need me to do something?
No, because you came on as a different,
I came on as like WPS.
yeah, so I have to get a
Want me to
different
go back
name.
to that?
No, I can find you.
And then there were two. There we go. Did you get it, Phil? Hello? Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Ken, okay. All right. Had a little bit of a problem with Zoom. Okay. At this time, I'll call the meeting to order for a public portion of the meeting. And I'll ask everybody to stand for the pledge. And David, if you'll lead us.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag, the
of the
United
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Well done. At this time, I would ask for a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session.
So moved.
Second, all in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. And there were no votes taken in executive session this evening. Thank you. Moving on. Letter F, public comment. Ms. Bonank.
I have about 17, 18 public comments this evening. I just want to let you know there were several that occurred after the noon cutoff time. So if there's time next week, we can read those as well.
Very good. Thank you.
This is from a concerned parent. The presentation of information is not transparent. Information is difficult for parents to find. The website is not updated, and with limited communication from schools, an updated plan needs to be posted for parent reference. Why is it parochial schools have transportation, but there is no busing for our own students? Good morning. I was just informed by a couple of irate parents that my daughter's fourth grade teacher was discussing returning back to school and notified the children that the rules would be for every child to carry daily every book, Chromebook, and other supplies needed, including their lunch. I am sure you are all aware physicians have expressed over the years they've seen an increase of beginning back problems stemming from carrying heavy backpacks. My child is not able to carry all the books and other items needed for school. There needs to be a better option. Other school districts are using electronic books. I appreciate your consideration on this matter and revisiting the opening school protocols. Rudy Royster. This is the parent. I was just listening into my fourth grade son morning meeting, and the teacher was discussing returning back. The children had many questions, obviously. My group is very excited to return. Something alarming stood out to me. The teacher said rules would be for every child to carry in daily every book, notebook, whiteboard, folder, basic supplies, crayons, pencils, etc., Chromebooks, headphones, recorders, as well as their lunches. My little pod that attends school at my home daily, and they cannot even make it up my flat driveway with their bags. The parents literally have to carry them for them because they are so ridiculously heavy. There is no way that these kids can possibly carry these bags up 3 flights of stairs as well. I completely understand that they cannot be leaving stuff in school. However, making these kids suffer more by breaking their backs on the daily, toting their stuff back and forth is not the answer. There has to be a way to utilize online books and materials. Actually, I know it's possible, and I cannot fathom why we wouldn't be accessing those for our kids in these times. This is not okay, plain and simple. These are tiny kids. This is not going to work and should be addressed now before the uproar of other concerned parents hits your feet. 8 parents from my child's class have already started stating their outrage to one another, and it's only been 10 minutes. I look forward to hearing a better, more suitable option. Sincerely, Heather Mello.
Excuse me, Bonin, one moment, do we know what school that is?
Wyman.
Okay, thank you.
Dear School Committee, After many unproductive conversations with administration, I am again reaching out to the school committee to express my concerns pertaining to the full distance learning plan, which is being carried out in our district. I supported the school committee's nearly unanimous vote to begin the school year with distance learning and still feel distance learning is the best option for my children. With that being said, I am pressing for a fair and equitable distance learning plan that will provide all students with the education they are entitled to. The plan which is being put forth by administration is not fair, nor is it equitable for our students or our teachers. Some children in our district that have not returned to the hybrid model are currently receiving 4 full days, some 5, like my child, of instruction provided by their teacher who is able to devote all of his or her attention to those in front of them. With the plan being put forth by administration, our distance learners will be required to follow the hybrid plan, in which they will now only receive merely 2 days of instruction at most from a teacher who is now required to teach synchronously and asynchronously at the same time. This is a task which is not only impossible, but is also not fair or equitable to our students, or our teachers. While some districts have been utilizing a virtual learning academy to teach their distance learners, Warwick could accomplish this by using our own teachers who, for one reason or another, are unable to return to work due to medical restrictions. If Warwick continues with the plan put forth by administration, we will be losing many top-notch educators who would be more than willing to provide our distance learners with the quality education which they deserve. It is time to do what is right for all our students. Nicole Urick. This is anonymous, actually. I don't have a name on this one. To say I am disappointed in your decision is an understatement. As a parent, I feel compelled to express this disappointment. School was open for 3 weeks before you decided that this wasn't working. Think about that, 3 weeks. Did you know that many parents didn't even get the survey and others did not fill it out because they weren't sure what they were agreeing to? And from what I can tell, many still don't. Talk about skewed results. You only got 50% of the survey returned and felt that was okay. Getting only half of them back isn't good enough. Is it good enough for you? Now children that receive full distance learning are completely getting the short end of the stick, and you should not be surprised if they pull their children out of your district. I understand you were getting email after email from parents that wanted in person, and you insisted it was not safe currently after having experts look at your building, and your number one priority was safety for your staff and children. Now that doesn't matter. The virus is airborne, and cases in this state are rising. I mean, your own meetings are not in person. Last week, when I listened to your reasons for not having in-person meetings, I had to shake my head at the irony. Your concerns were pretty much exactly what the staff's concerns are. What will you do when too many teachers are sick? No learning will take place. At least now we know what to expect. Children meeting every day with teachers and balancing the workload. Ideal? No, but consistent. I have friends in other districts, and it is not greener on the other side. Many have had to close or send student staff home, causing a huge disruption in learning. Having anyone to cover a class, is that learning? Staff are stressed beyond their limits and are feeling the physical and emotional strain of hybrid learning. At least consider having separate staff for DL, giving preference to staff at risk. Maybe give your staff a survey. You may be surprised at the results. When you first announced that Warwick was going DL, and I listened to the reasons why, I felt confident that you had everyone's best interests at heart, as difficult as it was. You stood tall when you were publicly criticized. You had done the hard work and it was deemed unsafe, and now it's all clear? Come on. You absolutely caved to the pressure. You absolutely are ignoring the science. The science has not changed. You did. I know you admitted that some of you did not feel comfortable with decisions, but caved to pressure. That to me was difficult to understand. Rhode Island cases are rising, and there are so many long-term effects we have no idea about. We are, in fact, in the midst of a pandemic, and we have one shot to get it right. As a healthcare professional, I can tell you the virus does not care what we believe. A very disappointed parent. My son is in kindergarten and is doing full distance learning. I believe all the DL students are getting the short end of the stick. As of right now, I get his schedule on Mondays, and I have a full 3 days of work, which is what he would do if he was going hybrid. So for the other days, I have to come up with some work to reiterate what he has done. This is absolutely ridiculous. I work full-time and find it very stressful to make sure he has work to do. There needs to be designated teachers for all DL to help the teachers that are trying to do both. It's not fair for the teachers, and it's especially not fair for the children. Thank you, Kathy Aruda. Hello, I feel having a dedicated distance learning teacher is needed and necessary for not only those teachers who made the decision to not work, but for all grades. It seems asking teachers to support both hybrid and distance learning is too much to keep up with, and the children get less space time and more independent work, which for early learners can be a challenge. My child is in a class where the teacher has chosen not to return to the classroom, which by all means is their right to make that decision. But my question to you is, why hire a long-term sub if the teachers can collaborate between who's in person and who's home to have a more cohesive, managed, more of a support model for the kids? Respectfully yours, Kelly Prey. Please explain how teachers are supposed to be teaching children in class and at home via distance learning at the same time. Why aren't the children that are full distance learners being taught by a different same grade teacher than the ones that are physically in school? And on the 2 days that my kids are at home doing distance learning, is that now meaning that they will no longer have any live teaching via Google Classroom? So now we will actually be down to 2 days of having live teaching and 3 days of self-directed teaching via following a posted schedule. These kids are getting less and less of an education. This hybrid model needs to be compared to hybrid models of other cities and towns. Angela Oliveira. And she continues with, why exactly are all Mondays being used as PD days? What purpose is this serving? For meetings? Our children seem to be getting even less of an education now that they are starting hybrid. So why are Mondays not being utilized as at least having distance learning for all? When there is a statewide PD day, why is it that some children have a full workload while others have the whole day off? Why are we not having just one monthly PD day? Why are some districts like North Kingston in school a full 5 days and thriving, yet Warwick is still struggling to get the kids in for only 2 with no plans to work up to full 5 days? Dear school committee members and Dr. Thornton, I wanted to take a moment to share with you how the return to the classroom has been for my kindergartner so far. Granted, he's only been in person for 2 days, but already I can tell it was the right decision all around. I just asked him what he likes best about being back in the classroom, and in true 5-year-old fashion, he said everything. When I pressed him to narrow it down a bit for me, he said he likes seeing his teachers in person. He likes not having to sit in front of a computer all day. There's an extra spring in his step when I walk him to school, and while he likes the daycare from which he typically spends his distance learning days, I can already see a difference in his approach to school. I'm writing about our experience so far to reassure the school committee that the right decision was made to give Warwick parents this choice, and I want to thank you again for taking this important first step. I am also writing, however, to remind you that hybrid learning is only the first step, not the end goal. The end goal must be a full return to in-person learning. I understand this is not going to happen overnight, as the lower grades are still being phased in and the high schools do not yet have a date to return to even the hybrid model. I get this will take time so you can see how it plays out and be sure you're comfortable with moving forward. With that said, the return to full in-person shouldn't be an abstract and open-ended concept left to discuss at a later date. This should be in the forefront of everyone's mind and influence decisions the school committee makes going forward. So while all due credit is warranted getting us this far, the work is far from over, and the students and parents of Warwick deserve your full commitment to bring all students that want to back to the classroom full-time. Regards, Sarah Neal. Dear Warwick School Committee and Administration, I have a few questions that I would like addressed. My first is about the anytime learning that is built into the student's schedule. My daughter is in 4th grade, and I am concerned that she is being asked to self-direct her own learning for the majority of her schoolwork. I am wondering if someone can provide to me the evidence base behind the decision to have elementary students engage in independent or anytime learning for the majority of their education. My second question is regarding the weekly Monday PD days that Warwick has implemented. The state mandated 8 Mondays for teacher professional development, but Warwick has implemented every Monday as a PD day. In other districts, Mondays are distance learning days. Teachers continue to hold Google Meets with their students. For the districts that are full in person, this gives everyone a chance to stay current with distance learning procedures in case that becomes the temporary default for a time. That approach makes sense to me, but I question the need for weekly PD days for Warwick when other districts are holding distance learning classes on Mondays. If Mondays were to become distance learning days, at least students would be doing only 2 days of self-directed learning instead of 3, which is what the current hybrid schedule requires. Furthermore, Mondays would be an opportunity for teachers to address the entire class at once and for students to see their whole class at least 1 day a week. These concerns continue to highlight the need for full in-person learning for K-12 in Warwick. Please continue to work towards full in-person learning, as almost every other district in the state has proven that it can be done. The sooner, the better. Sincerely, Katie Mulligan. To the members of the Warwick School Committee, I am writing to bring your attention concerns that we as elementary physical educators have regarding all-purpose room usage that have not yet been addressed. We are concerned that even though students are returning to school, there are not yet air purifiers in most classrooms. As we travel to as many as 6 different classrooms each day, we are unsure of our own safety, our vulnerable families, as well as that of our students. We have not been told that the all-purpose room is not suitable for teaching. We have been told, yet it can be used for indoor resource, lunch prep, mass breaks, and teacher break rooms, as well as storage. That is incongruent with what we were told. We were also informed that safety protocols do not allow the doors to be open for ventilation. It seems that it is safe enough to have students outside in the wide open schoolyard all day, but not inside of a room with 30-foot ceilings and the ability to sanitize between classes. We have been told to use outside spaces as much as possible. It's quite chilly first thing in the morning as opposed to dismissal time, and will become even chillier as we move towards winter. Also, we will have to share our limited space with those students at recess. We could walk the students via an outside route from their classrooms and back to the all-purpose room, eliminating hallway crowding, which we were told was one of the issues. Regarding equipment usage, we are degreed professionals and we can use plastic frisbees as well as aerobic steps and a balance beam individually in a safe manner. We are willing to sanitize during breaks, but 10 minutes is tight if one has to go back and forth from inside out. Fitness centers are open. Why can't we follow the same rules and regulations to operate our gyms? Respectfully, Ellie Hull. Dear members of the school committee, first let me thank you for all that you do. I know when you were elected for this position, no one could have imagined the decisions that you face on a daily basis. I was so proud of all of you when the governor tried to bully you into doing what she saw as the right thing for public school children, especially while her own children attend private schools. Your bravery allowed other districts to follow in your footsteps to ensure the safety and well-being of everyone in the various communities. Since March, several components have not changed to combat the COVID-19 virus: mask wearing, social distances, and the cleaning of high traffic areas. The governor has just announced that if someone comes to your home, they should be wearing a mask and be at least 6 feet socially distanced. But the best thing to do is to be outside where there is a great deal of airflow. She has also asked for businesses to close break rooms. Yet in schools with improper airflow, we are expected to house slightly less than the recommended group size of 15, to allow students to be distanced within 2 to 3 feet of each other, to allow a teacher to rotate among at least 50 students per day, as well as have 10 or more people eat in the same room. As an intelligent person, I cannot fathom why we use one criteria for all other businesses, but not schools. How can you allow 30 students to sit less than 6 feet apart on a bus or in a classroom? I think that is a shame that parents want their children back into a building without being clear as to what that would look like. Parents want their students to return so that they can get social interaction and connections with their teachers. While the plan has been published, I believe that it would be helpful for someone from the school department to explain clearly that students, when returning to school, will be assigned a specific seat and be expected to remain in that seat for the majority of the school day. Students will not be eating or socializing in the cafeteria during lunch or throughout the school day. My understanding of the plan, at least at the secondary level, will be that teachers will remain distanced from students and interaction will be limited. While many students struggle with distance learning, many of the colleges, other educational institutions, and other businesses are utilizing these strategies to work from home. As teachers, we try to teach our students time management, communication using a variety of written formats and working with a variety of people in different formats. These are skills that students must learn in order to be successful with distance learning as well. One positive case while students are in a secondary school could result in 100 students and staff along with their families and close contacts being quarantined. While some students may be in pods, teachers will be traveling amongst these pods at the middle level. At the high school level, there is a greater number of students who could be affected by a single positive case, as these students will be traveling and attending different classes with different groups of students. In March, we were in crisis teaching. Most educators took the summer to learn, prepare, and be ready for the possibility of teaching remotely. We are now utilizing distance learning strategies to teach students from home. There are a great many factors that interfere with student engagement and learning both from home and in school. My work week has doubled in keeping open communication going with students and families. I spend hours updating lessons in an effort to ensure all students are able to engage, learn, and grow while we utilize this form of education. While not perfect, please consider all the aspects that you have heard from before making rash decisions about what is the best for our communities. Do not allow yourselves to be pressured to do what does not make sense. Take the time to allow for reflection and revision of the plans to ensure as we bring students back, we keep them as safe and healthy as possible. Darylyn Gordon. Dear school committee members, Superintendent Thornton, and members of administration, I am writing to you to request a plan for full in-person learning to start as soon as possible for the students in the Warwick School Department. My son starts hybrid this week and he is very excited to go. However, 2 days a week in school is not enough. Our elementary, middle, and high school students deserve a full-time, consistent education. As a parent of a child who thrives off routine, as most children and adults do, going to school every day is something that is vital for my son. It provides him structure, accountability, as well as time to socialize with peers of his own age. There are things that are extremely important to students of all ages. For well over a month now, many other districts have implemented full in-person learning and have been successful with the right protocols in place, such as frequent hand washing, sanitizing classrooms, and desks spaced apart. I'm sure these districts have had some challenges, but I'm also sure that the pros of full in-person learning outweigh the cons immensely. With these same protocols in place, there is no reason that Warwick cannot follow suit and adopt to a plan for full in-person learning that fits our district's needs. Our children deserve it and need the structure that only in-person learning can provide. I've said it before and I continue to stand by it today. And this is nothing against the great teachers that we are fortunate to have in our district, but there is no substitute for full in-person learning, no matter how well the teacher gives instruction behind the screen. I sincerely hope there is a plan that is being actively devised to bring our children back full-time and that is implemented as soon as possible. Thank you in advance for your support in this matter, Jen Goff. Dear members of the Warwick School Committee, I have noticed that tonight's school committee agenda includes the item entitled Discussion, Fair and Equitable Education for Distance Learning and In-Person Learning. As I have already mentioned in numerous previous public comments, the current arrangement of having teachers teach both the students who are in school in the hybrid model and the students who have opted for distance learning is wholly inadequate. If your goal is fair and equitable education, is completely disruptive for the students and teachers and is ultimately unsustainable. Regardless of what your central administrators assert, teachers cannot and will not continue to plan for and teach 3 classes, the 2 hybrid classes and the distance learning only class. In fact, instead of listening to and believing the spacious claims of some central administrators, you should do as Mr. Cornell suggested at the last school committee meeting and listen to the teachers who are the true experts in the field. If you were to do so, you would discover that reality does not match the magical thinking in which some of your central administrators are engaged. Although I am tempted to review in great detail all of the reasons that you must direct your administration to create distance learning only classes for those students who, for whatever reason, will not return to in-person instruction, and to assign distance learning only teachers to teach those classes, I will summarize the main points and refute your administration's fallacious arguments. Following is a review of some of the reasons that you need to direct the administration to create distance learning only classes and assign distance learning teachers to them. 1, the hybrid model is already requiring teachers to plan for 2 different classes each day. 1 class for the students who are in person in front of them, and 1 class for those students who are at home. Not that some of you care, but this planning alone has already caused teachers to have to spend all their non-in-school time planning. 2, planning for and teaching distance learning only students is entirely different than planning for and teaching students in the hybrid model, and the 2 do not easily mesh. The administration has told parents of DL students that they can expect for their children to have 3 to 4 live Google Meets a day. The administration expects the teachers to be teaching DL and in-person students at the same time. In the meantime, the second half of the hybrid in-person class is at home doing anytime learning, for which the teacher also had to plan. How are young children who are distance learning only going to be able to comprehend what is going on in the in-person classroom? Also, contrary to what your administration has said, teachers are not going to be live streaming. No one is going to be filming while the teacher is teaching the in-person students. Furthermore, teachers are going to have to divide their attention between those students in front of them and those students online. 3, currently with the DL classes that have existed since the start of school, teachers are being cognizant of the amount of time students, especially the youngest students, have to be on screens. If you require teachers to teach the DL students while they are teaching the in-person students, the students will be on screens for an even longer period of time. 4, if you require in-person teachers to also teach the distance learning only students, then you are requiring them to teach an extra class. Are you ready to pay elementary teachers for teaching an extra class? And 5, the administration spent all summer promulgating that some teachers will be able to teach distance learning only classes. There are plenty of students who will opt for or need distance only instruction. The students and teachers need to be matched. Having teachers teach both in-person and distance learning only students is not working in other districts. Warwick should stick to its plan to create distance learning classes and not duplicate the mistakes of other districts. You should instruct your administrators to create the DL only classes that are necessary for those students who will not return to in-person learning under the current conditions, and assign to those classes the teachers who cannot return to their circumstances. At the last meeting, administrators were willing to ignore the legitimate issues with teachers teaching both in-person students in the hybrid model and distance learning only students. While they advanced their utopian vision of this current dystopia, if administrators think that planning for what amounts to 3 different classes and holding 3 to 4 live Google Meets a day for students, both at the classroom and online, is so easy, then they should teach a kindergarten, first grade class, or other elementary class for at least a week or 2, so that they can either demonstrate and model what they envision these classes to be, or they can learn that they are demanding that teachers do the impossible. One of the reasons that some administrators frequently give for making in-person teachers teach online students is that we know that students may have to quarantine. Although students may have to quarantine, they may also be out of school for other reasons. If a student is absent, then the teacher will do what teachers always do for absent students, which is provide the missing schoolwork and communicate with the parents if the parents request such communication. The possibility that a student may need to quarantine because of COVID-19 should not be the deciding factor, or really any factor, in the decision of whether or not to create distance learning only classes. If you are truly interested in there being fair and equitable education for students who are either distance learning or learning in person, then you will create individual classes for both and not continue with the current model, which will cause burnout for both teachers and students. Also, while we are on the subject of fair and equitable, how would it be fair and equitable for grade 6 students in Warwick if only the vet students have the option to return to in-person instruction? You need to instruct your administration to plan for the secondary schools to open together. You cannot treat some students differently than others. Thank you for the opportunity to share my concerns. At the last meeting, some of you intimated that you did not have to conclude public comment or that public comment was too lengthy. The emails that you get are lengthy because you are requiring the public to write their remarks instead of just being able to speak them. As I have mentioned in emails to you, you set up your meeting so that the members of the public could speak for themselves and the comments would not be so lengthy. Furthermore, you also used to allow public comment at the end of a meeting. That agenda item provided the public with the opportunity to offer a rebuttal for any spurious claims that the administration may have made during the meeting. On that note, please listen to the teachers who are telling you that we need distance learning only classes in Warwick as soon as possible. The teachers are the true experts and will tell you the truth. Sincerely, Darlene Necco, Warwick Teachers Union President. We are writing to you regarding our son's first grade teacher, Elizabeth Nawrocki. We were saddened and troubled to find out that she won't be able to teach at Sherman Elementary now that we have begun the hybrid school model. Our family is new to Sherman, and this is our son's first year there. Although he has always loved school and loved learning, the fact that this was his first year at Sherman was nerve-wracking for him. Thankfully, Mrs. Nawrocki took the time to meet with us virtually before the start of school. This gave us the opportunity to get to know her on a personal level and for her to get to know our son and to hear about his learning style. We were able to tell her how shy he is and express to her any concerns we had. Right away, our son warmed up to her and it gave him the confidence to attend the first Google Meet with her and the entire class. After a few days, he surprised us when he started showing interest in answering questions during the Google Meet classes. We were so relieved to see him overcoming his shyness and participating in the meetings. With the rise of distance learning, parents have gained the ability to listen in the background to their child's teacher during Google Meet classes. This was great for us because it gave us the ability to hear how Ms. Nawrocki interacted with her class, and we quickly realized how much she loved her job and the kids she taught. We knew for sure that our son was in good hands. Additionally, and just recently, Ms. Nawrocki took the time to create small groups with the class. This was a hit with our son, not just because it gave him a chance to participate with less eyes on him, but because he felt like he was making a new friend with one of the other students. News that Ms. Nawrocki wasn't going to be his teacher anymore hit us all hard, to the point that our son didn't want to go to school in person anymore. We have a hard time understanding why our school system doesn't have a better solution for a great teacher like Ms. Nawrocki, and why we would let her sit out of the arena that she so truly loves and cares about, just because teaching in person is not an option for her. Why can't she continue to teach the distance learning classes on the days the kids are scheduled for distance learning and have the other teacher take care of the in-person classes, especially if the teacher is currently a sub? I'm sure there are some families that prefer or can only do the distance learning model, and there are families like ours that would rather stay with Ms. Nawrocki until she's ready to go back to school when it's safe for her. If parents and students are given the choice to pick the school model that works best for them, why aren't teachers given the same choice? Finally, we all knew that this school year was going to present many new challenges, but thankfully distance learning with Ms. Nawrocki went pretty well, at least from our perspective. The fact that she is being removed from the classroom is causing more grief and uncertainties for our son. Grief that we didn't expect him to be experienced again at this point in the school year. Please consider revising district policies that so teachers find themselves in the same situation can be given the option to teach remotely if they can't teach in person. It would be a great loss to Sherman if we no longer have Ms. Nawrocki teaching our kids. Truly yours, Daniel and Sandra Rivera. Dear members of the school committee, in regards to our upcoming return to school, my student numbers are the following: 18 students in all, 5 students in Group A, 6 students in Group B, 7 students who will continue with distance learning, 3 ELL students, of which 2 will continue with distance learning. 3 of my 18 students would like to return to school but cannot due to transportation issues. It is apparent that not all students actually have the choice to return to in-person school. Several weeks ago, I had only 3 students on my LD list. It has now crept up to 7 due to daycare and transportation issues. I encourage you to consider having a separate distance learning teacher for those choosing to continue with distance learning. I feel parents do not understand that in-person teachers will not be able to be there for their child as we are now. Currently, I am available to students throughout most of the day. When we return, the focus has to be on the students who are in front of me. In-person learning is completely different from a virtual model. Lessons will be presented differently and may not translate well to those at home. I have one Chromebook that I will be using to access my document camera to use with students in the classroom. How am I to use that same Chromebook to reach my students at home? Going back and forth between a DL group and an in-person group is daunting. Who exactly do I sacrifice? Suzanne Warner, grade 5 teacher, Holloman. And that's all I have.
Madam Chair, you're muted.
Thank you. We'll do that over again. Letter G, school committee correspondence and donations. There are none for this week. H, recommended actions, approval of warrants, October 20, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you. I, announcements, personnel as presented. Superintendent.
Madam Chair, first up, I reluctantly have a resignation of Anthony Ferrucci, Exec Director of Finance and Operations, to be accepted upon school committee approval, effective December 31, 2020. I want to say, Mr. Ferrucci, my time here has been exemplary, truly, taking us through some very challenging budgetary times. He'll be sorely missed.
Any discussion? What happens, Mr. Ferrucci, if we say no?
I'm not sure.
Oh!
Can never leave.
And you know, this is like Hotel California.
Pack your bags.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Please, Mr. Testa.
thank you. Mr. Ferrucci, I share the superintendent's feelings. You've been here for a little less than half the years that I've been coming to school committee meetings. I've seen previous business managers. You are hands down, I think, the most effective business manager the school department's ever had in my nearly 30 years in the city. Your budget presentations, while lengthy, were very clear. You showed that you do manage money very well. It's a very big budget. There at times, I don't think you were treated fairly by the community, but you weathered it professionally. You never strayed from your professional commitments and your requirements. I, for one, will miss you, and your replacement has very big shoes to fill. You've consistently delivered budgets with surpluses or balance. Your audited balances have been exemplary. So you have a very tremendous skill set, and you will be missed.
Thank you, Mr. Testa.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Adams.
I think what Mr. Testa also missed is how terrifying you make some meetings. But thanks for everything you've done. Like, you've really, you've been through a lot. So I don't want to echo everything Mr. Testa said, but thank you for everything you've done for Warwick.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Cobden? Ms. Cobden? Ms. Cobden? Can you hear me? I think you have trouble. Ms. Cobden?
You there?
Can you hear?
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me? I can now. I couldn't before.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
But no,
I
that's
just wanted
okay.
to say to Mr. Ferrucci that I wish you, a wonderful time. Once you're away, you've worked very hard, and I know how much time you put into your job. And I agree, there's big shoes to fill, and that's a big position. And while working with you, I want to thank you for all your help and knowledge on getting me up to date on things that I didn't know of or couldn't have known of until I was on the school committee. So I'm very grateful for your help on that, and I will definitely miss that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Compton.
Chair.
Mr. Cornell?
Yeah, so Mr. Ferrucci, so you've been here since 2011. A lot has happened since then. You probably never thought that you'd be retiring during a global pandemic. Yeah, but you have seen a lot of history with the school district. You're pretty much the only executive director. Well, the executive director that's gone back. You've worked here more than any other executive director right now. Like
10 years.
So you have a lot of history. Yeah, 10 years. So yeah, so thank you for what you've done. You with finances, like with the school department, like your name's the only one that comes to mind. Like ever since I've been involved, like you've been the finance person. So yeah, so I wish you on a good retirement, and yeah, good luck.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, Tony, we've been together for a long time.
Yes, we have, Madam Chair.
And if I break into song, all right,
Please, no.
We're all
Please.
logging off.
if I promise not to break into song, will you stay?
If she promises not to break into song, will you stay?
We need a breakout room, Kathy, now.
There you go.
Nobody does it better.
Thank you. Thank you,
Oy
Madam.
vey.
You know how I feel about you. We don't have to get all mushy. We're almost both crying, so you know I love you.
I appreciate that. If I may, just one quick comment. It's been an honor and a privilege serving the Warwick Public Schools community and doing the best that we can for the students, which is what my whole focus has been as long as I've been here. And I won't sway from that. And I'm here to assist in the transition, and I'm here to provide counsel going forward. So no matter what happens and transpires, my phone is always available for conversation. So thank you for the opportunity to serve the city of Warwick. It's been a real privilege.
Thank you for coming to the city of Warwick from much more lucrative careers. We certainly appreciate it. Superintendent,
Madam Chair, I need to vote reluctantly on that item.
I just can't do it. All right. Can I have a motion, please?
Move approval.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next, Madam Chair, I'd like to get a vote, if I could, for the resignation of Tamara Gallo, math teacher, Tollgate, be accepted upon school committee approval, effective March 12, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, 5-0.
Thank you. Next, Madam Chair, I'm pleased to announce the appointment of Kim Bergieri, Director of Human Resources, effective November 1, 2020. No vote needed for that, Madam Chair, but just want to.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Next, Madam Chair,
Great
Madam Chair, we have classified middle management personnel items. First, we have the resignation of Frank Charette, Assistant Manager of Non-Instructional Services, Transportation, be accepted upon school committee approval, effective October 13, 2020. Need a vote, please.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have
Aye.
it, 5-0. Thank you.
Next, Madam Chair, pleased to announce the appointment of Kathy Bonang, Confidential Secretary to the School Committee, effective November 1, 2020. And lastly, happy to announce the appointment of Greg Stevenson, night custodian, Robertson, effective October 13, 2020. And lastly, the coaching recommendations as presented, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Discussion update, Windman and Tollgate facilities update, Superintendent.
I think, Madam Chair, are we on number one anew?
Right, the committee needs to vote, those were appointments, the committee needs to vote on 1 through 4 for the contract and the agreement issues.
Okay. Number 1, Executive Director of Finance and Operations, contract addendum.
So, Madam Chair, as discussed in exec session, I'd recommend approval.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 The ayes have it. Number 2, Director of Human Resources contract.
Madam Chair, once again, as discussed in exec session, recommend approval.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, 5-0. Number 3, confidential secretary to school committee contract.
Once again, as discussed in exec, recommend approval.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All in
Madam
favor?
Chair, for discussion, just want to say something.
Yes, Mr. Cornell.
Yeah, so my vote tonight is in no way reflective of the secretary. Ms. Boning's an excellent secretary. I just didn't like the process and I thought the position should be posted. So that's just why I'm voting the way I am tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Cornell. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
4-1, Mr. Cornell dissenting. Discussion action, professional employee settlement agreement and release.
Madam Chair, recommend approval for our discussion in exec session.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Ayes have it, 5-0. Number 5, discussion update, Windman and Tollgate facilities update. Superintendent, Mr. Gothberg.
Madam Chair, I can start to give it over to Mr. Gothberg. Last week, we actually had the opportunity to once again meet with Arden Engineering over at Windman and Tollgate. The basic question we wanted to explore was the interior classrooms at both Tollgate and Windman with no windows. You know, where does that leave us? What are the options? So Mr. Gothberg can give you essentially what we have at this point in time. Mr. Gothberg.
Good evening, Madam Chair, committee members. In your packet, you have a single-page Phase 3 guideline revision for ventilation. It was issued on 10/7/2020 from RIDE, and reopening ri.com, health.ri.gov. Basically, the changes are related to classroom size and air changes and the number of people allowed in those spaces. So with that in mind, we contacted Tim Elliott from Arden, who is the consultant for the state. And we went and looked at both Windman and Tollgate. So in my memo, basically it says Phase 3 guidelines for ventilation issued on October 7th, 2020. Please note the air changes per hour HCH guidelines have been revised to reflect that if we can achieve air changes per hour between 2 and 4 with air purifiers, existing exhaust fans, classroom doors open to the corridors, we will have the ability to open both Tollgate and Windman in the hybrid model only, using all classrooms, perimeter and interior. Recommendation would be maximum student population should be no more than 13 per classroom. To open both buildings to a full return of all students in a non-hybrid model would require bringing additional fresh air into the buildings via mechanical means. This might be achieved by installing a temporary system at Windman until the new HVAC system is installed and completed approximately 3 years from now, and at Tollgate, a more permanent system with ductwork tempering heat that would move the tempered air, fresh air into the building, creating more air changes per hour. Both concepts as potential solutions were proposed by Tim Elliott of Arden Engineering. And he was this was on site at both facilities. Much work would be needed to be done before any options could be considered to review feasibility, timelines, and of course, cost. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Gothberg, my one question is, could we install more HEPA filters to achieve 100?
That could be done, but there seems to be more concern about air exchange, not just filtering. So if we could get a little bit more fresh air, especially with the interior rooms, I think we'd be much more comfortable. And it'd be a much longer term solution.
Exactly, but a much more expensive one.
Correct.
Which we may or may not have the money for. Comments, questions,
Madam Chair,
Mr. Testa,
thank you.
and then Ms. Cobden.
Mr. Gothberg, thank you. A question about the Windman and Tollgate remedy. We don't have any idea what those would cost. We would have to actually do the due diligence, right, to find that out.
I could spitball a number, but I'm hesitant to do that because if
Yep.
it's too low, that's what everybody expects.
Right. And so on the tollgate system, the high school discussion is still alive
Correct.
with Mr. Locker. So if we did go forward with tollgate and put this system in, does that system stay if we do say a major remodel of tollgate, or does that get removed? And so are we spending?
I would think, to answer your question, it would be removed.
Right. So we'd be spending, I'm sure this thing is 6 figures minimum.
Correct.
To install something only to uninstall it later. While I understand what the intention is, I don't know, that could be a tough one to get our arms around. And the third question I had was, I guess, for Mr. Ferrucci, would any of these fixes, if we decided to go forward, could they be paid for with bond funds? Is there some sort of an emergency procedural thing you could do with RIDE?
Well, with the RIDE perspective, I don't think there'd be an issue. They would get on board because they have housing aid availability every year. And so we would just be in that pipeline. The only bond we have in front of us right now, of course, is the $40 million that we're working with, and we're already into year 3. And so those funds are pretty dedicated. And the $56 million we have in front of us is really focused on the elementary schools and getting the elementary schools up to speed. So it really does boil down to, within the next 18 months, the 2 high schools. And those $8 to $9 million worth of HVAC installations that we have is, again, spitball for everything. But that whole discussion centered on what are we doing with the high schools and how extensive a renovation or replacement are we doing? Until that question gets answered.
Madam Chair,
Superintendent?
just to
I
add
think we're stuck.
discussion, we actually did receive an email this week from the state talking about the potential to maybe have more funding available for schools that are fixing schools like this. Whether or not we qualify, we don't know. What the timeline is, we don't know. The email came out, I believe, yesterday. So it's just something they share with us, potential for more funding being available to fix buildings.
Mr. Ferrucci?
My quick read on that, because I did receive the superintendent's notice, was about $4 million for the whole state. And so we're going to be getting a number shortly, but I think it's going to be a 6-figure number. So we will have those funds available to dedicate, and this was something we can look at. But I don't think it's going to be significant enough to be the kind of program that we're going to need.
Yeah,
Ms.
my only
Cobden?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Ms. Cobden, you were next.
Okay, thank you. I'm a little concerned about putting anybody in these rooms because I've spent time in some of them, specifically one, and that room doesn't even have a door that goes to the outside. You have to walk through another classroom to get into that classroom. So the ventilation in that said room is going to be beyond minimal. I don't know. I don't think anybody can convince me that that would be that this is going to be a safe option. I was in there with kids. I was actually going on a field trip with them, so I was there in the beginning, and I was sitting there for about a half hour, and it was already, I want to say, claustrophobic. It's not, they're not big rooms. And the room that you have to walk through, that room, I mean, does have an outside door, but the other door leads into this classroom that only has that one door. So as far as air quality goes, it just seems to me now, if we have 13 kids or whatever the minimum was, something like that, in one of the rooms, and then 13 in the other, we're just blowing air around in a room that has no windows. I mean, I agree with Karen. Like, can we put more HEPA filters in there? Would that help? I don't know. I just, some of the rooms I've been in without windows, I'm very concerned about, very concerned after spending time in them. And I would definitely, I mean, Nathan doesn't have to, because Nathan went to that high school, and it would be, he probably can give the best, he has the most knowledge because he did attend it. But I think, you know, it would be worth, if we're actually looking at that, for people to actually go in those rooms and sit in them for a little while and see what it feels like, because it's a totally different feeling than being in a room, a classroom. I mean, I'm nervous about Pilgrim because the windows don't open, but it just seems more airy because there's so much more light and there's doors that open. But a lot of these rooms, I don't know. I really think it would be worth, before we even start to think about it, to take a trip up there and spend some time sitting in them. But I agree with David, like, we're going to spend all this money to install something that is going to get ripped out. I mean, we don't have that kind of money unless the state is willing to give us, you know, some more COVID funds or something to cover this. I mean,
You just muted yourself, Ms. Gobden.
Yeah, our kids suffer so much because we have lack of funds, and I don't know if that's the best thing that we can do if we have to take our funds and do that. I think we have a million other places we would like to spend the funds, that type of money. Like Mr. Testa said, it's going to be at least 6 figures, if not more. So think of what we could do with that money, you know, besides doing that. I know the percentage of rooms, is it like 25%, Mr. Gothberg, in vets, or not vets, in Tollgate and Windman? I mean, what's the percentage?
I think it's higher at Tollgate. Tollgate, I believe, is in the 30-35%.
Wow. Wow. So
and
that's a huge
Women
problem.
is about 25%, if I understand it correctly.
So you think Windman's 25?
25 to 30, yeah.
Right, and it's about 35 at Tollgate. That's a lot of space. I don't know. But I do suggest that before we do anything, I think the school committee members, it would be worth your time to go walk around and sit in some of those rooms and see what it feels like, because I was sitting in one of those rooms, like I said, for, I think it was even more than a half hour, and it was tight. It was tight, and the air was still. So just my suggestion. I'm nervous about this. I personally wouldn't mind talking to Tim Elliott myself. Thank you.
Ms. Cobb, a question on that. I would call that a double inside room, but that was prior to COVID that you felt that way, correct?
Yeah. This was my first year when I got on. One of the teachers was taking the students to the prison, and he knows that I have a degree in criminal justice, and asked me if I would be one of the chaperones. And it was an amazing field trip. But I did spend probably total over an hour, you know, in that room, maybe close to an hour, because we had to get there and then we had to wait for the bus to come and, you know, get all the kids ready. And it was strange. I sat in one of the kids' desks and I had students all around me and there was no air in there. So I don't know. It's a big concern to me, because that is what you said. It's a room within a room. I mean, when I first ever went to that classroom, because obviously I'm very interested in this course, that it's actually the teacher's Mr. Solito, and I had a hard time getting into the classroom because I didn't realize, like, it was like a maze. You had to walk in and then walk through, and you kind of have to say hi to everybody. So now we're actually having kids crossing each other in there too. It just seems like if there's more rooms like that, no way, because there's too much crossing. These kids have to walk through one room to get to another room, and they're walking by other students, which is basically what we're trying to avoid. So I don't know. I definitely will have to head to the schools and see the 35 and 25 and look at all the rooms. I can't make a judgment, but personally, I wouldn't mind talking to Tim Elliott because I don't think this is possible without spending a lot of money that we don't have. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, I've been around long enough and, you know, a number of us have been to see the whole fire code upgrades and all that. And, you know, we had to do the fire code upgrades. We did them in many buildings that we then turned over to the city, and that a number of them are no longer usable without major construction. When we're talking about bond money also, and Ms. Ferrucci can weigh in on this, it's not like the state's going to give us 100% of the money to fix or to break through, you know, roofing and ceilings and everything else to make this happen. And we're not talking small money, we're talking big money, and then that's going to all be thrown out. But the city would have to come up with a portion too, so that would have to go, you know, to the city for approval. And that's a big ask, and I don't know if it's economical in any sense.
Madam Chair.
Just,
I just have one thing to add. I'll be 1 second. I also want to point out that these rooms in the summer, and I think Nathan can attest this because I'm sure he sat in some when he attended Tollgate, they can get up to 95, 100 in the summer. So then there's really no air quality. So this is a big concern. Thank you.
we call those bakers. Mr. Cornell.
Yeah, so as Ms. Common said, I went to Whitman and Tollgate, and the rooms do get rough in the summer because I've had in classrooms that like had no windows at all during the summer, like even going to early September, and it was, I remember one year it was really bad. But in regards to those two schools, like the airflow is not good. Like there's no natural airflow at all in the school. The hallways I remember at Whitman, they're wide, so it's not like it's going to flow, and Tollgate like is full of rooms that just have no windows at all. They're in the inside the school. Some rooms are even inside in the ground because the Tollgate was built into the ground, and so it was Whitman. So I agree. It's just we'll have to do something because we can't do what we did with the elementary school because there's just no natural airflow at all, and it's just terrible quality airflow. And actually, last year when I went to Whitman after I was sworn in on the school committee to visit, and they showed me problems with the air there, and they actually showed me how and I actually felt how different floors and different rooms had different temperatures than others. And I asked them how to fix this, and they said the only ways to fix this is if you give us a new AC. It's problematic and it needs to be rectified. But in regards to this disease, there's a lot of problems can happen, and with heat, it's not good for this virus.
Thank you, Mr. Cornell.
Madam Chair, if I may just
Mr. Testa.
Thank you. I think we need to be a little careful here in delineating between what air exchanges are, and it's not necessarily going to cool the air. So if you got a 90, Mr. Gothard, correct me if I'm wrong, you can have a room that's 85 degrees, which we all know is not a good room that's conducive for teaching or learning. But you can have air exchanges. It's still going to be an 85-degree room.
Correct.
Right? So
Correct.
it could feel stuffy because the air, this isn't like having a fan blowing on you or anything like that. All it's doing is taking the air in the room and it's cycling the air and it's changing it and filtering it. So, if we're gonna, I don't, again, I said it last meeting, Ardent Engineering is a professional firm. I don't think they're going to stake their reputation on selling snake oil. But I think we have to have a default position to get back into school in person. I don't think we could ever do full in-person high school every day, every student. I just don't think that's possible for a variety of reasons, not the least of which those inside rooms. But I think those inside rooms with their purifiers in them and with the student limitations can be utilized. Maybe that one, I'm going to call it an inside room. Maybe that's one you can't use, but I don't think we throw all the windowless rooms out the window. Well, bad analogy, to say they can't be used if we've got air purifiers in there. That's the whole point behind the purifiers. It won't do anything to change the humidity in the room or the temperature and the climate, because some of those, I've been in those rooms where they get to be like 88 degrees or 90 degrees. It isn't comfortable. But, you know, the day that fixes a new HVAC system for Tollgate. And that's another discussion for another day. Because if we're not going to use those inside rooms with air purifiers, then I don't know how Tollgate goes back. I just don't know. Dr. Thorne, you could speak to it better than I can, but I just don't know how if we can't use 25 or 30% of the rooms, I just don't know how you can go back even in a hybrid model.
Question, to whomever can answer it. How many double inside rooms do we have at Tollgate?
We have to check, Madam Chair. I can't tell you off. Kevin Oliver might have the better sense.
Relatively, I mean, you know.
I believe there's 8.
8.
Yes.
So I don't think the committee would want those double insides, the back rooms.
Absolutely not.
Lots of reasons. You know, they've always disrupted the other class when kids had to go to the lab or things like that. But with COVID, I think that is just completely contraindicated. Anyone else on this? Okay, we'll move on. Number 6, discussion, action, authorization to purchase up to 75 air purifiers through Amazon Capital Services. Mr. Ferrucci? Mr. Guy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've been notified that there are additional purifiers, and Mr. Gothberg has been working on ancillary rooms in addition to classrooms that may need them. We did review the CARES funding, the grant that we received from the state, and determined that there is additional funding to pick up even additional purifiers. So I'll just defer to Mr. Gothberg about the logistical use of the potential of picking up the additional purifiers.
Thank you, Mr. Ferrucci. The areas we're looking at are for a lot of staff areas, such as the guidance areas where we have staff congested, smaller rooms. We're looking at any area where you know you're looking at more than 4 or 5 people in one particular area that we would treat it like a classroom. So we would have to we really believe we need to start moving purifiers into those areas.
Any further questions or comments?
Madam Chair.
Besta?
Thank you. Mr. Gothberg, these 75, these are available for immediate ship?
They were last week. I don't know what they have now. Mrs. Bonang would look at that tomorrow if we have authority to move ahead with this.
Okay, and then some of these also for spaces where services get delivered? Like some spaces with like maybe PT or OT gets delivered?
I've tried to hit those with what we've got now, the 1,260. If I've missed a couple areas, then yes. I've tried to be proactive in searching those out.
Okay, and then I was just going to ask you for an update on the orders we have in. I don't know if you plan on giving that later. If I'm premature, then
I give it, no, 300 were shipped yesterday and 300 were shipped today. So I do not have tracking numbers, but I'm assuming it's 5 to 6 days to come across the country in a truck.
Okay.
So
and then the 60 that came in for K rooms, where are we in the installation process?
As of tonight, I thought we would get them all in, but Hoxie will be the last one done tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, so okay, good. Thank you very much.
Chair.
Mr. Adams?
So Mr. Gothberg, with the 60 for that we made for the air purifiers that we had previously, and the 75 here, and the 600 that we're going to be getting, are we going to have like some that are just going to be sitting around, or are they all going to be used?
Oh no, they'll all go in.
Okay. So are we going to need more after this?
Well, that if I play off of Ms. Backus's comment earlier about maybe adding to interior rooms, maybe doubling up to increase air change, then potentially we could look at purchasing more if that would be the committee's desire.
Okay, and I'm sorry, Dr. Thornton, you want to say something?
That point also, Madam Chair or Mr. Adams, I know also there was a discussion earlier about, in the winter using the cafetorium, gymnasium type locations. That would also require some thinking on how we tackle that and how many you might need to do that. Because in January, if you're inside, you want to utilize the spaces. If you do use the space, how many would you need for those? And there are 13 elementary schools, so 13 times those large spaces.
Okay. Now, Dr. Gothberg, you said, oh no, Doctor, sorry.
Thank you. But I appreciate the thought. Thank you.
All right. So, Mr. Gothberg, you said that you saw this last week. I'm assuming it was after our last school committee meeting.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess it's something I'm just going to pose this question to the rest of the committee. Would it be reasonable and prudent to allow like a certain, like a cap or like a certain number, like, hey, if Mr. Gothberg sees this many air purifiers currently available, like he can order it now and then just float it by us at the next meeting. So that way we don't risk them going out or whatever it may be.
You just took the words out of my mouth, Kyle. Thank you.
I think I would have to check with Mr. Ferrucci first to make sure that we have the funds available before we went ahead with that, but that's the committee's desire.
Typically, the committee has given us the authority to make these purchases as long as they're budgeted. So I would take it that it would be a not to exceed, 200 units as long as it's budgeted as the caveats. The superintendent had talked about the additional funding coming in from the state. So we would be poised to be able to take advantage of any of these budgeted funds that would come in if they gave us the authority based on budget, and we would manage to that.
Right. I just don't want to see like the opportunity to hit 75 like last week, and then Mr. Gothberg has to wait a week to put it in front of us, and then that 75 becomes like 20 or something of the sort.
But couldn't we also do that under an emergency purchase? Because it really is emergent to get kids back. Ms. Ferrucci?
I think we could, as we've done that in the past, but I think giving us that blanket authorization that say 200 units, up to 200 units, as long as it's budgeted, that gives us the criteria in which to work in. And then we would advise the school committee chair, just like we typically do on these types of purchases, and then advise the full committee at the next meeting.
And if it's determined that we need more?
Well, the 200, I think, would be a decent buy. We can cross that bridge once we cross the bridge of taking in the 200.
Thank
you.
you.
Start to see how it rolls out, and we'll reapproach you.
All righty. Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Testa? Ms. Cobden? No?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I move approval to purchase up to 75 air purifiers through Amazon Capital Services.
Madam Chair, can we move that to the 200 based on budget, based on our current conversation?
Oh, okay. I thought this was, all right. Yeah, 200.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you. Discussion, fair and equitable education for distance learning and in-person learning. Ms. Backus and Ms. Cobden. Ms. Cobden, did you want to speak to this first?
Yeah, I can speak.
But, I mean, if you want to.
Yeah, no.
Go ahead.
Okay. No, I can speak about that. I really, honestly, it's such a tough call because you have two sides with the fair and equitable distance learning in person, because you have parents that have made it clear that it upsets them that they're going to lose their teacher if we do this. And I totally understand that. I completely understand that. But in this pandemic, if that is the safest route for your child, I want to make sure that your child gets the best that they can get educationally under the situation that we're in. And I truly feel, after watching what other districts are doing, reading, I mean, I constantly am reading about distance learning all over the country, how it's going, what's working, what's not working. I mean, there's so much out there on this that you can read. But I really think that we need to have a distance learning teachers and have them for the kids that are staying home. Because it is true, as someone said it in one of the comments, that they're not going to get the same attention that they're getting. And I've already gotten emails this week from parents saying they can see a difference from what it was like to when, you know, before, like the week before kids started doing hybrid, and they already can see a difference. And I don't disagree with that. I think I think we need our teachers to be able to give the attention to each kid. And I think we talk about equitable, that is equitable, because if they're sharing a teacher who's got kids in person and then you're on a computer. I mean, I'm on Zoom right now and I have to go like this sometimes when I want to see something, and that's no fault of anybody's. It's just, you know, you got a bunch of people on this screen, and I know that Miss Bacchus might not see my hand up. However, I really think that we need to go in that direction, because we did get a lot of good feedback on what distance learning's been like. And I think a lot of the parents that complained about the distance learning are the ones that have put their kids in. So I really think we need to provide those students what they deserve at home. And I completely understand that you don't want to change teachers, but it might have to happen. It just might have to happen.
Madam Chair,
Superintendent.
I know, having spoken to a few members on this earlier, if we do have a meeting next Tuesday, which I think we have scheduled, our team can certainly bring back to the committee a detailed representation of what it could look like in Warwick, given the current amount of people who are in DL, right? Staffing implications. I would just say this simple comment: nothing is as simple as it seems. Across Rhode Island, you're seeing both models, and I think both models have their pluses and minuses. But I think before you were to I think really go forward, if we brought you forward a model with, like, you know, staffing counts, how many staff would you need? How many kids are projected to be in the DL model, right? Scheduling implications, all those things, you have it all. Dr. Taylor would be there informing you, Ms. Amelot, Ms. Danberg, myself. Then you could really get into it. A one agenda item, if you will, just DL, and really lay it out for you. So we're happy to do that if you want to explore that.
That would be excellent. I mean, I know we spoke earlier, and I would like to hear the plan. And what everybody needs to understand, and I'm talking to everybody out there in the cyber world, this is the unknown, and everybody's trying, and we're all trying to do our best to make sure that every student is being taught to the best that we can do under the circumstances. And I really have to say that it's going to take a village, and I've said this before, for it to go as smoothly as possible. And I know a lot of parents are frustrated, and I know a lot of the kids are frustrated, but at this point, you know, everybody is trying to do their best to make the
Yeah, we lost your voice, Ms. Cobden. Oh, Ms. Cobden.
And I would really like to hear the full presentation from you, Dr. Thornton, because it does, for me, it seems like that would be a smart route to try. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Just a minute. I'd like to say a few things before this was Ms. Cobden and my issue that we wanted to bring, so I'd like to speak first, if you don't mind, Mr. Cornell.
Oh, that's no problem.
Okay, thank you. Tonight we got many comments about distance learning, about in-person learning. One of the things that kept coming up was being able to differentiate for our kids that need it. And I don't think that the current model allows that at all. It kind of overwhelms teachers and maybe the students a little bit too. And I think that originally we discussed a virtual academy, if you will, or something of that type, and we had started to plan for that. For me, this doesn't provide a fair and equitable education for our kids. Taking kids that have been going to school 4 days a week and giving them 2 days a week of instruction and 3 days a week of anytime learning, if you will, in my estimation, is just way too little, way too late. And so we need to find a way to provide all of our learners with a fair and equitable education. And we need to do it quickly because this should have been done months ago. And there's far too little, in some respects, going on for some students. If students are attending in person, then that's a choice that their family, that their parents, or that they have made. Their parents have to make that decision. So they've made that decision. That may mean that you are not going to have the same teacher. Whether you're in person or distance learning, you may not have the same person. You may not always have the same person. That teacher could get sick or lots of different things. So this happens in the real world. It happens in education all the time. So we have to be mindful about that. I know that we have many fantastic teachers who have done a great job with distance learning. Now, many of those folks want to go back to the classroom, not all, but I think we have to make both available, and we can't make our teachers jump through hoops to provide 2 or 3 different lesson plans and to try and differentiate between in-person learning and distance learning when they don't even really have the proper tools, even if they wanted to do that. They have one Chromebook. So there's lots of concerns with regard to how things are going. Now, I've heard a lot about, oh, what if somebody gets home? What about if somebody gets sent home and quarantined for 14 days? Well, if they're in-person learning, that teacher is responsible for them. If their parents want to switch them over to distance learning because now they're spooked about having their child in-person learning, then that is something that a parent can do. But we're not going to switch kids from in-person learning to distance learning to in-person learning to distance learning like people change underwear. It's inappropriate. It's not good for the student. It's not good for the classroom experience. I understand some changes and things can happen that people say, wait a minute, we have to put the brakes on. I'm not comfortable with this current situation. But we need to be mindful that this isn't one teacher today and another teacher tomorrow. If somebody's out sick or somebody's out for another reason, their classroom teacher is responsible for that. And that is how things should continue, even if they're quarantined, unless a parent says, I want my child in virtual for the foreseeable future. So I don't want to see education, whether it be virtual or in person, become the do drop in. It's just not It's not a good program. It's not a good thing for anybody, especially our students.
Madam Chair,
Superintendent.
I think I'll probably reserve a lot of my remarks for next week, but just one example for you on how there are pros and cons of this. As you heard today, we have a quarantining of one of our sports teams. So under the public comment, I think Ms. Necco, those students would be home interacting with their teachers, getting, 2 weeks of homework and not having any virtual time with their teacher. So to me, that's not okay. That's an example of a bad outcome in this model. But I think there are also good outcomes too, to be fair. There are good outcomes where you have probably that more dedicated person teaching those students at home. That's why I want you to really have all the info. There truly are pros and cons with this.
Superintendent, in that situation, is that teacher also quarantined?
Could be. The teacher could be still at school, but those students are home for, that 14-day quarantine. And under the idea of one of the folks in public comment, the teacher would interact with those students at home, maybe talk to the parent. There was no indication in that model they'd be, Google Meeting with these students. They'd be home doing homework for 2 weeks. And to me, that's not a good.
I think maybe we need to review them all individually, because if a teacher and her class were quarantined, then the teacher could teach that class from home, perhaps, if they're all quarantined, because the teacher may not be sick and the children may not be sick.
So next week, we can certainly bring everything forward that we have for you.
Please.
If it's a one agenda item, we'll spend the whole time on this one item.
Thank you, Superintendent. Mr. Cornell?
Yeah, so I completely agree with Ms. Cobden and Ms. Backus on this. Like, the current situation, it's just not working. Like, and I understand parents' concerns that they don't want their students to switch teachers, and I completely understand that. It's a difficult transition. However, like as a school committee, as a district, our main purpose is to ensure that students get the best education possible. Right now, they're not getting it. It's inequitable. So I'm definitely in favor of having certain teachers just be for all distance learning and certain teachers just be for in-person learning. And I would like Dr. Thornton to give that presentation next Tuesday, because and I think it should be under discussion/action. So after we get the information, we can vote for it, because this, as Ms. Backus said, like we need to get this done. Like we can't just hold out on this. Like we're already weeks into, like 2 months into a school year, and it's like we need to take action, because like the more we prolong this, the harder it's going to be on our students. And I know it's hard to switch teachers, but like I remember when I was in elementary school at Cedar Hill, like the first half of the year I had a substitute teacher, and then my regular teacher came back. Like it was a transition, but myself and the rest of the students got through it. And I believe the students get through it. It won't be easy, but it's hard times. What's happening now hasn't happened before. So, but we need to make sure that these students get the best education possible. And I think that having teachers in these certain roles will be the best thing for them. So that's my opinion on this matter.
Madam Chair,
Who's?
it's.
Danbrook, I'm sorry.
You brought up a lot of good points, and I think with Dr. Thornton, we will investigate our different options. But we've only been in person for 4 days doing this new model. So we really haven't had a lot of feedback from the teachers doing it. We have the kindergarten teachers in, and the first grade teachers just started today. So we haven't been doing that model for very long. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair, if I may.
You can just give me 1 minute. The other thing, I don't know how my committee members feel, but Mr. Testa can certainly weigh in on this. We need to be back to school on Mondays. There needs to be school on Mondays. It's a waste of time unless there is a regular teacher training day, or unless you can show me what kind of training and in service and things like that is happening to help our teachers. Because in my neighborhood, where I live in a pretty gentrified neighborhood that has started to turn over. So now we have lots and lots of children who attend school in the neighborhood, and they're all out playing on Mondays. And so that concerns me. I mean, our kids are getting the short end of the stick due to COVID, and we're cutting the week short. So unless we're doing in-service every week, professional development every week, all day long for 6.5 hours, then we need to really look at that. So I would ask that you look at that. Mr. Testa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree on the Mondays. I think a couple of things here. Ms. Danbrook, to your point, I mean, we essentially just started this and you know, we just started and we want to change it. So I don't get that. I understand the arguments on both sides. I do. But I would like for you as part of your presentation next week, because my understanding is, and I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. I think the vast majority of districts that are doing this are not doing DL dedicated people. I think they're doing it in a way that we're approaching it. Secondly, I mean, again, the fact that we just started it, I think there probably are some teachers who have embraced it and who have probably done some pretty innovative things within our own district, within K&1. So if there are those teachers, we should share what they're doing to everybody, so everybody knows, you know, what the possibilities are. And I think we need to have a discussion about getting elementaries back full in person. And I mean full, every kid, every day in person, ideally 5 days a week. Because I think once the purifiers are in and installed, there's no reason, in my opinion, why we can't do that. So secondary is a different discussion. I would even I would say high schools are a separate discussion. Middle schools, maybe we have a different discussion. But I think, you know, I want to see both sides of this, because the way it was explained at the last meeting, I think it can work. I'm sure it's working in other districts, and I'm sure it's not working in other districts. So the key questions to ask is what's different between those districts that consider it that it's working and those that are not. But I'm not ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater yet. We haven't even birthed the baby. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Testa.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Cornell.
Yeah, so as I said at the last meeting, like I understand like that we're just starting this, but like we should anticipate these problems and address them before they occur. Like, and if the earlier the better, because like as I said, the later we prolong this, it's going to just hurt our students more. Like, let's just fix this now and then at least be clear, and it'll make it more clear to all the parents, clear to all the teachers. And this is the time to do this right now, not wait till later when everyone's in their new schedule. So it's just, I think we should anticipate this and do this as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Dr. Conley?
Yes, I just wanted to point out, I'm not sure, I want to make sure the committee has all the information they need to make, this is a difficult decision. There's no easy way to do anything in 2020. But we have been doing this at VETS since VETS open. When we talked about how to configure the classes and figure out how the teachers would address the students moving over to VETS, the teachers really wanted to keep their consistent students whenever possible, and really wanted consistency, and have been teaching kids in person and online since VETS opened, and it has been open for several weeks. Has it been perfect? Nothing is right now, but we have been able to do it at VETS for the last couple of weeks. And it's also, I would add, I know it's a topic of discussion as well, but it also has enabled us, I think, to have a smoother transition when students have had to quarantine or classrooms have had to quarantine, because they all know each other and they just, move together. Respectfully, I just wanted to share that information.
Thank you. On behalf of the committee, I appreciate it. We want input from everybody. We'll throw out ideas, but we want input from everybody. Ms. Cobb.
I'm sorry. Could I just add one more thing?
Of course you can.
I'm really concerned if we are looking at distant learning academies that we're not going to have enough certified special educators. I just think you have to keep in mind that whatever we do for gen ed teachers in classrooms, we're going to have to do it for special ed as well. And as you know, over the last couple of years, we've had, a lot of challenges finding certified special educators. So I just think you have to consider we may be challenged if we have to add positions, which I suspect we would, it would be hard to find those individuals.
Thank you.
And we also have the ratio, contractual ratio issue for the co-taught classrooms. So that limit constrains, you know, the mix of kids that we can put in the classroom.
Thank you. Ms. Compton.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, things are going to develop and change as we go along through this pandemic. This isn't something that, you know, we scheduled. This isn't something that you can prepare for. And we are trying our hardest to do, and I know every district is, to get it better. And it's going to develop and it's going to change. And people need to understand that. It's not something that just, oh, well, we sat there for the month of August and decided on this plan. There was so much work involved in just getting us to a place that we were at. And it was like that in every district. Fortunately, I'm glad that I had a committee that agreed that it wasn't safe and we stayed with distance learning. But with the kids going back, things are going to develop differently and things are going to change. And we have to roll with the punches. And I want the community to understand that this is not something that we sit and just plan out and like we do every year for curriculum and things. This is something that it's a pandemic. It was dumped on everybody. It was dumped on the students. It was dumped on the teachers, and it was dumped on our administration, and it's been dumped on the world. Our whole lives are all different, and people need to understand that this isn't something we can sit around and plan for all summer, because we didn't even know what it was going to be like all summer. Every time we were working on things, the rules kept changing. Things started, we want a plan just to open. They wanted a plan just to open. And that didn't happen. That happened at the end of July. We didn't have a ton of time to figure this all out, because honestly, there is no correct one solution, and it's going to change. And I appreciate anybody, as far as teachers, administrators, that want to speak out like Dr. Conley just did. I mean, that's important. I mean, with Dr. Conley, she's dealing with the special ed community, and we do have much smaller classes than what we have with general population. And you know, I think she's doing a tremendous job, and I think everybody's trying hard. And from the feedback that I get, I just hope that people are listening and understanding that this is a huge challenge. This is something that we have to work at, and it's going to develop and it's going to change, and things aren't going to work, and then we're going to have to change it. And that's life right now. It's 2020. That's life, you know. It's going to change, and people can't just say, oh, Warwick's horrible. Oh, they don't plan for anything. That's not true. This is happening in every district. And if people want to look, this school committee and our administration have more meetings probably than any elected body in the state. I was talking to somebody on another school committee, and their meetings are an hour long. An hour long. We're trying our hardest, and I think people need to kind of roll with the punches like everybody, like we are, and understand that it's not going to be perfect. And I don't understand how anybody could think this is perfect, but everybody's trying. And I think if everybody just works together, parents, students, teachers, everybody in the community, admin, school committee, we all need to stay positive and try to do our best, because the bottom line is this is for our kids. These are our kids' education, which is extremely important. Extremely important. And by not understanding that this is something that is going to fail at times and develop, and there's going to be positive and negatives, it's just complaining. And you know, I would hope people can understand that, and I wish more people would watch our meetings to understand that, because everybody's working very hard, and I appreciate everybody's hard work. You know, down to the custodians. Everybody is trying to change with this virus. Whether you want to believe there is a virus or not, people need to understand that we believe there is a virus, and we're treating it very seriously. And people need to understand that. And I just wanted to add that because this is about their kids' education, and we understand that, and we want the best, but this is not regular school, and we're trying to make it as normal as possible, but there is no normal right now. The minute you walk out of your house, it's not normal anymore. You walk out of your car, you have to have a mask on. You have to be careful everywhere you go. It's not normal. And I think sometimes the concept is being lost, that this isn't normal and everybody's trying, and they can compare it to our district, to other districts. Maybe they're happier that some people are all going to schools, but they are having problems. It is not a fluid motion. They're fixing things just like we are as we go along. And I respect everybody, and I respect our administration, and I really look forward to seeing what we can come up with. Maybe it will work better, maybe it won't. But we're in a pandemic, folks, and we got to do our best. And I think Warwick is really working hard. And despite the criticism and the ugliness that gets thrown at us, I'm very proud of our district. And I think that we are doing the right thing. And I think looking at different plans like Dr. Thornton is going to do is very important, because that's all we can do right now. All we can do is keep thinking. And that's why we are having meetings every week. We normally don't have any meetings every week like this. This is what we're doing to improve and do the best that we can. Sorry, I just had to make that little speech.
Thank you. And you bring to mind a number of things, Ms. Cobden, and we do need to try and stay positive, and we do need to stay focused on students and on education. I had some parents call me today about, well, you know, first it was you're not teaching the curriculum, and now you're teaching educational standards, and why can't it be normal? Well, like Ms. Cobden said, and everybody knows, these are not normal times. Your children and you may have the opportunity to once in a while have a normal moment, but those are few and far between these days, because there is nothing normal. You can't expect to send your kindergartner or your first grader or your fifth grader to school and have them play like they normally would, or have them play sports or hold hands or anything like that. Everything is distance, no matter if they're in school or they're at home. And there just has to be, because we have to keep people safe as much as we can. And it's one of the reasons why we didn't open initially. And it's one of the reasons why a number of us were very hesitant and remain hesitant about being open, and certainly about opening full throttle. I mean, I am not going to say to a parent, we're not doing distance learning anymore. We have air filters, therefore you have to send your kids to school, or we're not going to provide an education, which is what some people have written to me and want us to do. What you want to do with your child, you do with your child. You're in charge of your child, and other parents are in charge of their children. And we're not going to say, oh, well, it's all safe because we have HEPA filters. It's not. It's not. And it never will be until we can mandate a vaccine, until we, number one, have a vaccination. Number two, we can mandate that vaccination, which will be coming when we have something that is safe and proven. So we will put into process, a mandate for kids to come back to school full in person to make sure that they have the vaccinations. So, because we don't want to continue to affect people. And the majority of us believe in science, and we don't believe in herd immunity, because somebody who's talking about herd immunity as they're talking about it has it all wrong and doesn't know science. That's my soapbox. Mr. Testa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing I would say, I mean, you know, a lot of the correspondence we're getting from parents and the whole DL thing and DL dedicated teachers, we're talking about equity. Dr. Connolly can probably concur with this, as can Ms. Danbrook. Equity has been a challenge for every district for ages. So it's always been a challenge. The pandemic makes it even more challenging. You know, it's a word that's oftentimes overused and wrongly used, but you strive for equity. But, you know, in this particular environment, every single district in this state is struggling with equity. Ask any parent of a student with an IEP or a 504 how they feel about equity during a pandemic. So, you know, I know we want to hang our hat on equity, and that's one of the hats, that's one of the hooks we should be hanging on. Not the only hook, because there's a whole bunch of things that we're trying to accomplish here. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tesla. And while we're on the subject of equity, equity and equality are not the same. They come from the same root, but they do not mean the same. Please understand that.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Adams.
So I've got I had a lot of things from everyone. I guess the first one I'd like to address, Dr. Connolly. You had said in terms of special education, just making sure that we have enough special education teachers or teachers that are certified in special education available. I think in just terms of that, and if we were to pursue a distance learning academy, what we might want to do is again try to send out another survey, and just in terms of who teaches what, especially at the high school level when it's separated in sections. I do agree with a lot that's been said. Most notably, what Mr. Cornell said about like how we need to like really make sure this is planned out correctly, and I understand that Mr. Testa says that like it's only been out for 4 days, and we don't really want to like start changing the system before any kind of proper information is ascertained. And in terms of equity, it being a problem, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to attain equity. I'm not saying that, Mr. Testa, you said that we weren't trying to attain equity. I'm just saying that if there is an opportunity to try to make it more equitable, to go after it. I think that was really it for me. I support the idea of a distance learning academy as long as it is equitable and it proves to be something that we can ascertain and do it well for our students, and that we have enough teachers that would be able to make it possible.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Adams. So then at the next meeting next week, the administration will come to us with a plan, and that will be the number one issue on the agenda for next Tuesday's meeting. Correct?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Cornell?
can it be in discussion/action, just in case we want to take action on it?
Oh, of course it will be discussion/action.
Yeah, it's just today was just under discussion, so I just want to make sure.
No,
that
we have
it's
discussion.
under it too.
Oh, well, that's how we wanted it. That's how we asked that it be broached.
Okay, but
But
next week
today,
will be
because we wanted to
discussion/action?
discuss it so that administration and teachers and everybody could go back and determine what would be proper. We didn't want to like hit people over the head with something.
I understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but next week will be discussion/action though?
Of course.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on number 7? Moving along, number 8, discussion elementary and secondary teaching schedules. Sparkus, Ms. Cobden. Ms. Cobden, do you want to address this or shall I?
You can go first this time, Ms. Bacchus.
Thank you. It's come to our attention that people are not necessarily teaching a full day or being available to students for a full day. And we've had a lot of complaints about that. It's concerning. We have not cut anybody's salary, as far as I know. So we'd like to know a little bit more about that from the administration, about what's going on and what can be done if necessary to correct that. I'm hearing about office hours, half hour a week, things like that. Very concerned.
Madam Chair,
Stanbrook,
I can speak for elementary.
thank you.
Mrs. Amala and her team put together clear expectations of what a day should look like, what type of teaching. It starts with a morning meeting where you review your expectations for the day. You might review past learning, do some social emotional learning, and then you'd have a Google Meet for the kids at home. Most of them are still at home, and invite them to like an ELA lesson, maybe at 9 o'clock. And then take your mass breaks if you're in school. If you're not in school, take a break. And after your ELA lesson, you might assign aligned learning activities for the students to do after the lesson. Then you send them another Google Meet to come back, maybe review that activity, and then assign a math time for the students to come and meet with the teacher, and then have like lunch, and then come back and either do like a social studies or a science lesson in the afternoon. And I don't know if Mrs. Amelot wants to add anything to that.
Amelot?
So those guidelines have been out, and we're actually working with principals right now. I know some parents have been reaching out because we do have variation across the district of how many different teachers are hosting different amount of Google Meets. And so as your direction, we can work on really tightening that up across the district. But as Mrs. Danbrook said, we did give that guidance of that, the Google Meet followed by some work, followed by another Google Meet, and some work very similar to the flow that would happen in a classroom. I'm just using this as a vehicle for doing that.
I have some copies of some schedules that are embarrassing, and I won't make them public right now, but I will if I have to.
Madam Chair?
Yep.
I would also like to add that the principals, the elementary principals have been going into the Google Meets. So if all the children were in a classroom, just like they'd walk in and out of classrooms to visit and see the teaching and learning, they are going into the Google Meets to see the teaching and learning is happening. And I think that would really help with equity in the schedules.
And I think all of our principals, vice principals included, whether they're teaching and learning or not, have a responsibility to partake in that and to share in that. I know that one parent called me today and said her child had no outreach from any teachers at all today, and was very discouraged. So there was no Google Meet, there was no morning meeting, there was no nothing. So I don't know what happened. But I'm also hearing about secondary schools, and it appears that there are some serious issues. I mean, our teachers teach, how many hours a day do our teachers generally teach when in a normal, non-COVID environment?
So at the elementary level, they teach a little over 6 hours, maybe 6 hours, 6 3/4 hours.
Okay.
Half hours.
And at the secondary level?
They typically have 5 48-minute periods plus an advisory period that they are required to teach.
Okay. So right now, that is not happening. It is certainly not happening in the,
If you look at the secondary plan, we're doing approximately 24 hours of instruction, 14 hours, approximately 14 hours of meets, 7 hours of office meets, and 4 hours of after-school department nights. So you have approximately 25 hours of in-person, well, FaceTime instruction with an instructor in 4 days. This does not include, additionally, we had requirements of 5 hours for each class for instructional time for materials at the middle level, as well as 6 hours of instructional time for each class at the high school level. If we look at our instructional minutes that we meet in a 4-day period at the high school, we're approximately 19.2 hours for those meets in the 4 days, plus the additional 4 hours of department nights. We're pretty close on our time between the two. It may not appear that way, but when you break it down by the actual minutes, discount the travel time, remove the lunch and the advisory, it's pretty close to the instructional time that we're offering students. Students may not be taking advantage of the instructional time that we put forward, but that's what we're offering students at this time, based upon the plan that we did in early August and then put into a schedule in mid-August.
Mr. McCaffrey, are you aware that some teachers are doing office hours for 1/2 hour per week?
That's not true.
It is true. It is true. That was told to me by a principal.
Each period, each class that they have an office hour for. There's an office hour aligned to each period in the schedule at the middle level and the high school level. So they're doing more than a half an hour of office times, but for each period they have an office period where we're able to meet students. So they're not limited to just one 30-minute period. If they're only doing a 30-minute period, then that needs to be investigated and looked at and adjusted accordingly.
And that's what I'm asking, because we have parents calling us. We have parents calling us, telling us that their children are getting 2 classes a day if they're lucky, if the teacher doesn't not show.
And if that's happening, it needs to be reported. It needs to be, the principal needs to follow up on it.
I agree, and I don't like to bring these kind of things up in a time like this, but we haven't cut anybody's salary. And I think we should be teaching, a full day, maybe abbreviated, but a full 5 or 6 classes or what have you per day in some sort of AB rotation or something, so that all of our kids are being educated appropriately, or as appropriately as possible. This is very disappointing what I'm hearing.
I appreciate your comments. I mean, we executed based upon the guidance we were given. And if you look at the instructional minutes with the meets, office visits, office hours, and the time after school for department nights, we're pretty close on FaceTime contact with students.
Anybody else?
And we also, part of the plan was that to remain flexible, where that if we need to make adjustments, and obviously if there's criticism from the community, we can look at it, digest it, and make the appropriate adjustments as necessary to have the best plan that we can for our students.
It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for me when a parent or parents send me a schedule that says class 1, then class 2, then nothing after 11:30, and office hours, and then their kid tries to go to office hours and the teacher says, oh, they're not there. But enough people are contacting me that I know that there's some truth to it, especially after speaking with someone in the administration who's a principal or vice principal. We can do better, and we have to do better. And I'm not trying to pick on you, Mr. McCaffrey. because I have the utmost respect and I know that this isn't all you,
That's fine. I have thick skin, Madam Chair.
as do I. Anyone else? So, in discussion next week, I'd like an update on this from the administration. Number 9. Does anybody else want to say anything? Okay. So number 9, school nurse policy and school closure. Ms. Cobden, do you want to address this or shall I?
No, we can take turns. I'll do it.
Okay.
We came into a situation when we first started where two schools did not have nurses for specific reasons. And I actually thought that it was a Department of Health regulation for COVID regulations, because I was on committees and one of them was with the nurses. I was on that committee all summer, and it was always discussed that we were going to have a nurse present in our schools. And it appeared to me like it was one of the regulations that were given to us. And when we had to not open 2 schools, a lot of the public got very angry that we did not open the 2 schools and feel that we should not have nurses in it. And I obviously did I tried to talk to some people and they were very angry about it. And then I did my research and I did find out that it is not a regulation by the Department of Health, but it's something that we are doing, and I completely support this. And this was handed in, I believe, as part of our opening plan, that we will have a nurse in the school. So we have to kind of keep with this. And that was given to the state, I believe, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
I believe it was.
Yes, it was.
So with the amount of anger towards this, I don't know if we need to make this an actual COVID policy for us, but people need to understand that this was our plan. This was handed into the state, and we are going to not have schools that don't have nurses. And there is a shortage of nurses, just like there's a shortage of substitutes. And our staff is doing the best they can to make sure that we are equipped with a nurse. And I've been following this, and I've talked to just recently, I spoke to Ms. Danbrook, and we get information on this. We get emails on this. We do communicate that they're trying their hardest to make sure we have nurses. And I don't know if anybody heard, but in the beginning, before we opened schools, that was one of my concerns. What happens when a nurse gets exposed to it and we don't have a nurse? We already know there's a shortage. And from my understanding, from being on the school committee for almost 2 years now, we've had issues where COVID didn't exist. And we had nurses running around covering schools, and it got very, very ugly. People have to understand that these nurses aren't just there for COVID. We have kids that have issues. They have health issues, and we need to make sure that it's covered. And now we have COVID on top of it, and it's going to be bad if some of these kids that have pre-existing problems all of a sudden get sick. So we need to have our nurses there, whether you agree or not. So I brought this up because I totally back this up. I know it was in our plan that we handed into the state, and I know this is what was planned all summer. So I'm wondering if we should make this like a temporary policy right now, to stand that we cannot have schools open without the proper nursing. We cannot put this on our staff. We cannot put this on our teachers. That is not their jobs. They have full PPE. They look, when we were discussing this, they have the gowns, they have the gloves, they have the shields, they have the N95 masks. They have everything that they're supposed to have. And it's not for the secretary in the office to go run and help a child and sit with the child while we figure out with the Department of Health what we're supposed to do. There are protocols here. The nurses are trained for these protocols. All the staff isn't. They are trained to deal with this. There is a way that they have to go. If we have a possible case, it has to be followed. It has to be reported properly. And these nurses have that system down. And people need to understand how important it is right now to have a nurse present in our schools. So I don't know if we need to make this a policy or not. I just wanted to bring this up because I wanted to make it clear that this was something that we handed into the state and we agreed to do. Thank you.
This is a no-brainer. And I say we don't open schools unless we have a nurse in that school. Who would like to take care of a kid with COVID or something else? It's not the job of a secretary who's already burdened with all kinds of responsibilities that they're not trained for when a principal's out of the building, if they're in elementary. It's not the responsibility of a teacher who's trying to teach a class and manage a class. It's not the job of the principal who's trying to run the schools. It certainly isn't the job of a janitor who has absolutely no training and isn't medical personnel, nor any of those other people. We should always have a nurse for every building. They are trained. They are trained in medicine. They are trained in how to handle these type of situations. Nobody else is. And they have a professional license to back it up. I know that everybody in this district, at least in the administration, has been working very hard, especially Ms. Ruggieri, been working very hard to find nurses because, again, like subs, they are probably more few and far between. And we absolutely need nurse subs. Okay? So if anybody knows any nurses that are licensed, that don't have a problem working with little kids, then give us a call or go online and, send us your credentials because we need good people to take care of these situations. And I would like to have a district policy that says we don't open schools without an RN in those schools. Mr. Testa.
Madam Chair, thank you. Ms. Cobbin, I know why parents get upset when you close school because there's not a nurse. When my kids were in elementary school, they were in school during the times that schools shared nurses. And that was a Warwick policy. They just shared nurses because on the days that Mrs. Bond wasn't there, Mr. Ritchie became Dr. Ritchie. And I'm a little concerned about if we're going to make a hard, fast policy that we don't open a school unless there's a nurse in there. I think we may be setting a very high bar for ourselves.
During COVID?
Dr. Thornton, hold on. Dr. Thornton, the protocols for COVID, if a student is diagnosed, right? Is it only a nurse that can handle the protocol? Or is the principal also a designee to handle the protocol? If a student exhibits symptoms?
Ideally, you want the nurse, certainly in a pinch, if the nurse wasn't there, you'd have someone else, but ideally you want the nurse.
I understand.
Principal is not a trained medical professional.
I understand that. So
during COVID, Mr. Testa.
I understand we're in COVID. I mean, believe me, I know we're in COVID. So my point is, we submitted a plan with the state. I understand that. Okay, and I'm not sure that we're subjected to monetary fines if we don't have one. But why couldn't we on a day if we don't have a nurse? Why couldn't we share a nurse? And again, we have to realize what's happening here. Okay, if we have if we don't have a nurse in the building that one day, okay, if no kids exhibit any symptoms, we shut down that school for a whole day. So again, it's not a requirement from the state that you have a nurse. Okay, and I'm not being dismissive. Please don't misunderstand. I'm not being dismissive. But I'm trying to understand, the fuller educational perspective here. So if a nurse is out sick that day because of whatever reason, nurse's car breaks down on the way to work.
We'll get her there.
Yeah, but for us to automatically reflexively say we're going to close the school, I have an issue with that. Not every district has a nurse, and the only reason we got one-to-one nurses is because we consolidated schools. That's how we ended up there, right? And Dr.
It
Thorne, I
was a-
think you and I support having a nurse in every school. The issue I'm having is if on one day the nurse doesn't show up for whatever reason, we're going to shut the school down. So closing the school impacts a lot. There's domino effects from just closing a school because we didn't have a nurse. When if there's a principal there and a child is running a fever, a principal can use a scan
Principal's at a meeting.
right? But
Principal's at a meeting, Mr. Testa. Then who?
And so, all right, well, whatever. I think we're placing an impossibly high bar on ourselves, and principals can be called out of meetings if you have a student exhibiting symptoms. We're not doing tracheotomies in the building here. If something was that severe, we just dial 911.
Madam Chair.
So,
Dr.
Ms.
Conley,
please, thank you.
I really urgently think, because I do supervise the nurses placement, and we work together on the decision to put one-to-one nurses in the schools during consolidation, because pre-COVID, when we split nurses, kids' medical needs change all the time. Kids move in and out of the district. Kids get new diagnoses. All kinds of things happen. You would not believe the health issues. We're a public school, of the kids that attend the school. And I would approximately every quarter collect data from the nurses on how many students in their school had life-threatening medical conditions such as diabetes, seizures. There's quite a few students that have seizures that need a very particular medication that needs to be administered within 5 minutes because the students aren't breathing, and that happens.
Allergies and anaphylaxis.
Correct, and allergies. And every time I would collect that data, I would score the school as a 1 having, no real needs, a 2 having moderate needs, and a 3 having 3 or more kids with a life-threatening condition. Every school was 3s across the board. Once in a while I'd get 2s, and that's how I would split the nurses. Then you have medications that have to be administered daily, and parents get very upset. And in Rhode Island, the only people that can administer the medication is a nurse. So parents get very, very upset when their child is supposed to have a medication for a variety of reasons and we can't administer it. Prior to COVID, and I have to commend my nurses, they are very diligent. They know their kids and how much their kids need them. Literally, their lives are depending on them. Their attendance is remarkable, but things happen. They get sick and circumstances get in the way. We would have a nurse cover just for medications, but we weren't, we were on a wing and a prayer with all those other conditions and checking students' blood sugar and all that. I wouldn't recommend it pre-COVID. Now add COVID to this, and the fact that any symptom from any student has to be treated as a possible case or a probable case, and PPE has to be used. I really am concerned that if we have buildings without nurses, that we are not going to be able to properly tend to all the other kids that attend every single day, but also the kids with COVID. I think it would be very hard for the nurses to get pulled out of their home school and go to another school, and then something happens at their home school. I think that would put tremendous stress on them. I know that the decision, I'm a working parent myself. I understand that's not an easy decision, but I really think for right now, if with everything being so new and us just opening, that the best approach is the most cautious approach, because it's much more than just taking a kid's temperature and figuring it out. Kids' health needs these days are incredibly complicated, and then add COVID to the mix, it is quite a lot to manage.
So if I understand you correctly, Dr. Conley, you support if there's nurse isn't available that we will close the school? I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you said.
I do. For right now, this is new to us, running schools, having them open. The virus is changing. Is that going to be my recommendation? In a couple of weeks or months from now, I don't know. But for right now, it's a lot to think that one nurse is going to be able to cover, and you have to put yourself in that nurse's position. 2 kids present with symptoms at the same, and these things happen. same time, different schools. You know, where do they go? What do they do? It's a lot. It's a lot to manage right now. All the cases have to get reported to RIDE, the Department of Health. We're in constant contact with the Department of Health, going back and forth as to, kids that are being quarantined, family members that are being quarantined. It is a lot right now.
All right, thank you. So is our plan then to develop for lack of a better word, a bench of nurses?
We have that. I mean, we have substitute nurses. We have agencies. We work with about 4 different agencies on getting day-to-day nurses. But as Ms. Backus mentioned, that's, they can go work anywhere. And
Everyone's calling for them.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I understand. If we have a nurse with symptoms and has to quarantine for 14 days.
Well, then we're going to have to get a sub, and we actually have a situation where that's the case in this district, and it's being filled by subs, as well it should be. But the fact is that people who are medically trained, and I come from a medical family full of nurses, and this is not like, oh, the principal can take care of it or the secretary can take care of it. And so, nurses have a license to practice. They can't practice beyond their means, but you or I can't practice and do the kind of things that nurses do, because it would be malpractice and we could be sued. And there's only so far that some provisions go, like the Good Samaritan Act and things like that. I mean, so I think we have to be very careful. And, there was a time when this district didn't have one-to-one nurses. We had one-to-one nurses, then we lost one-to-one nurses. Now we have them back. But it was a focus of the committee to have a nurse in every school because of some of the dire situations, health situations that some of our kids are in. Now, kids who are very, very sick, who come to school, some of those have one-to-one nurses as it is in their plan. But those nurses cannot be taken away from their student to help out with something else. And just like, a principal is there to do a certain job, and a secretary and a teacher, we all have our jobs. And we shouldn't be crossing the line, especially when a medical professional, like a nurse, has a license to practice medicine. And a doctor has a license to practice medicine. That's not for, just any of us to walk in and say, oh, I'm sorry, little Johnny, you don't feel good today. Because we don't always understand what's going on. So I would ask the committee to give us the direction, if the majority of the committee gives us a direction to put a policy together, which I would recommend and hope everybody would agree to, or at least the majority.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Cornell.
Yeah, so for one, I want to thank Dr. Connolly for her insightful explanation. And she is absolutely right. We need a qualified person in there, a qualified nurse, and a principal or any other personnel. They don't have the qualifications, and especially with the coronavirus going on, we just can't afford that. We need a nurse in the building, so they're the only ones that can do the job, and the school's not safe without somebody with medical training. So I completely agree with that.
Thank you, Mr. Cornell. Mr. Adams?
I mean, I agree with it as well. As Mr. Testa brought up the time of Mrs. Bond going from multiple schools, I was actually in the system at that time. Mrs. Bond was my nurse, and there were days where I do believe that I wasn't feeling well, and I went down to the nurse, and Mrs. Bond wasn't there. So I am totally in favor of the one-on-one nurses, and if it is going to create some form of risk on students, if a nurse happens to be out that day and we don't have a nurse to fill in, I would totally be in support of having to shut it down for the day.
We close the building, but we do distance learning on that day.
Yeah.
So it's not like the kids don't, I know it puts some weight on the parents' shoulders, because then they have to run around and make arrangements, but they have to make arrangements like that when their children get sick, or when there's a snow day, or, you know, previously, because I guess we don't have snow days anymore, but I mean, I think that medical issues, such as we have, compounded by COVID, just make this a no-brainer.
Madam Chair, this isn't an action item though. So would this be for policy sub? And if so, my only question is, are we going to make this a policy, a standing policy, or is this just going to be a COVID related policy?
Well, I think the policy committee can discuss that.
Okay.
But I wanted to get the feeling of everybody to have this discussion to see if there was support for it, or to see what folks had to say, because we don't get to meet outside of, you know, these meetings. So, because that would create a rolling quorum. So.
Yeah, my only concern is closing, obviously, and this is obvious. Okay, this isn't nothing earth shattering here, but closing a building has to be the absolute last resort.
You're absolutely right.
For a case like this, I mean, a snow day is one thing. If my kid's sick, it just affects me and my kid. Closing a building affects, you know, hundreds of people.
Ms. Ruggieri last week went through hell last Friday trying to find a nurse so that we could open. And let me tell you, she worked her butt off. She probably should get premium pay for that day. And she found a nurse. And we didn't have to close. And that's how our director of human resources works. And that's how everybody works as a team in this administration, to make sure that kids are going to be safe. But this is not the time to say we don't need a nurse in every building. And certainly people will do whatever they can to bring a nurse in. Ms. Cobden.
Yeah, I would just like to add that people need to be prepared for school closures. I mean, we're seeing it everywhere. I mean, Cranston just had to close a school because a kid had it. Hendricken just closed. Hendricken closed. You know, people pay a lot of money to go there. This virus doesn't discriminate because you go to a private school. It's going to happen, and parents need to be prepared for instances when this is what I was talking about earlier. We have to work as a community. We have to understand nothing's going to be perfect, and things are going to change in a minute, and things can change in a minute. A school can be shut down in a second. Your kid might have to be rushed out of there to go and get tested. It's going to happen. We're seeing it everywhere. We just opened. We've had problems already at vets. So, I mean, it's the pandemic and it's COVID, and we're having to roll with the punches of COVID. And I personally can't understand why, you know, anybody would want kids in the school right now without a nurse. That's just my personal opinion. But like I said, when we were planning the program to give to the governor's office and RIDE on how we reopen, I was in the subcommittee with the nurses, and that was always the plan, that there was going to be a nurse in there. And that's what they're expecting us to do on top of all of this. And I think we need to follow what our plan was, since we now have opened.
Dr. Conley?
I agree with everything that everybody's saying, and I agree with Mr. Testa that closing the school should be a last resort. But I just want to stress that, you know, God forbid a child started having a seizure at a school, and, you know, the nurse wasn't there to time it and administer the medication to help the student come out of the seizure because they were dealing with a COVID related issue at another school. You know, that would be an absolute tragedy that is preventable right now, as tough as it is. And believe me, it was very difficult for us to close schools on what was going to be our first day of opening. That was not an easy decision. We weren't anticipating that we would have nurses in quarantine this quickly. You know, everybody was prepared to come back. Everybody was willing to come back. We were ready. And like, you know, Ms. Cobden said, this virus controls, you know, the way these things happen. It was not an easy decision, but I definitely think it was the right one, because I think right now more than ever, the health and safety of the students needs to be foremost. And as I mentioned before, I think it would be stretching the nurses way too thin to have them try to make that decision as to where they should go and who they should support. It's just too much right now. I would stress though, to make sure that the policy is amenable, so that if things change or we get new advice or new knowledge
New guidance.
about how to proceed, that we can change it or use our discretion, because we absolutely want schools to be open. We absolutely do. But everything's so new right now, and we're taking a very cautious approach. And I would also request that we have our nurse department head involved in the policy conversations to get the nurse's actual perspective on this.
Absolutely.
We'll absolutely do that. And the other thing is that, and Kate, I think Dr. Conley said it, but no one can dispense medication in Rhode Island schools unless they have a medical license, like an RN or an MD.
Only the school nurses
School
can give
nurse.
medication in the school. The secretaries can't do it. The
Exactly.
nobody else can do it.
Or Dr. Feldman could come in and do it, but I don't know that he's available.
In theory, yeah.
In theory. But that's the level of practice in the state. So we have to live by that too. Okay, thank you for that discussion. And finally, item number 10 under new business, discussion adhering to COVID guidelines. Dr. Thornton and Ms. Stanbrook.
I'll go to Ms. Stanbrook first, Madam Chair, then I'll finish up.
Thank you. Stanbrook.
Madam Chair, members of the school committee, I just wanted to address the fact that now that we are opening schools and the grades are all coming in at a staggered model, that every school has a plan. This plan has been shared with parents and with teachers. This plan includes, thanks to Kevin Oliver and Kim Ruggieri's staff, extra custodians, building aides, extra lunch aides, a floating substitute teacher. So we're covering all our bases as far as staffing. So we can get the cleaning done. We can get the coverage that we need done. We have mask breaks going on each hour. We have staggered lunch schedules. We have safe outdoor recess areas with games that you don't have to touch one another. So I'm very pleased on how kindergarten and first grade has opened with all of these protocols in place. We also have a seating chart that we have in the main office for each classroom. So if there is a COVID case, we can report to or share the seating chart with the Department of Health. And every person that enters a room has to sign into that room. So if a building aide enters a room to cover for lunchtime, let's say, everyone's signing in. So I'm very pleased at the protocols and how smoothly the arrivals and departures have been going. I visited 3 schools so far. I plan on going 2 more tomorrow to check it out, but I'm very pleased to report.
Madam Chair, I'm also, having said that, we still do have some work to do. We will be reemphasizing with the staff the need to not come to work if you have symptoms. We did have a situation last week where actually an employee came to work with symptoms, and now we have many people knocked out for the 14-day quarantine. So we really have to reiterate, if you are sick, stay home, right? Follow the guidance. When that doesn't happen, it leads to other people being quarantined. So we're going to reemphasize that with all of our staff.
Even parents with students.
Yeah.
And to emphasize that is absolute. And also parents, please do not send your children to school sick. We had a situation last week where a child was sick, a high school child was sick, and one day very ill, and the parent made her go to school the next day. Please don't send your children to school without having them checked, because that can shut down an entire school. That's what happened at Stadium Elementary in Cranston. Now they're shut down until at least November 4th. And part of the reason that we have people sign into classrooms is so that we can do proper COVID tracking and things like that. So we know who has been exposed where and to whom. Ms. Cobden.
Okay, I have a couple of things I want to say. First of all, the second incident that happened at Vets, I'll speak for myself as a school committee member. I learned this through the grapevine and I was not contacted. I know for me personally, if there's anybody who has to leave a school, if there's anybody that a classroom being cleaned out and tested, an employee, anyone, I expect to be notified of this. I know we were notified today on something, but I did not know about the incident that you just spoke about. And it's not helpful when I'm approached from people in the community wanting to talk about it with me or confirm anything, and I don't know. I don't need to have the people's names. I just need to know if it's a custodian, if it's a teacher, if it's a child. I just want to know that. So I would just
What
like
school?
to get that out there that I expect, and what school? I expect that the school committee should receive notification, and we were in the beginning, and now that incident happened. I got nothing on it, and I was pretty horrified when I found out days later about it through the grapevine, through someone emailing me. That's not cool. The second thing I'm concerned about that has brought to my attention, I know we're having this temp agency with the custodians. I guess Mr. Oliver, you can probably help me on this. Okay. Are these people going to other schools or are they ours now? That's my first question.
So what's happening is they're being trained in one building right now, and the following day they are being put in their permanent position that they're going to hold for the entire time they're working for us.
I get it. The thing that I'm concerned about is the school that they're being trained in has our most vulnerable children in. And I don't know. I don't know anything about any of these people. Do they have to fill out a form? Did they come from a school in Providence? Did they come from, I don't know. And I'm concerned that they're training in Vets. That concerns me.
Right, that building's operating right now. That's our biggest facility to get people trained and out the door as quickly as possible to staff the other buildings. All the people that are brought in are required to wear PPE, rubber gloves, face mask, wash their hands throughout the course of the day, social distancing, not to take breaks together. Presently, I have gone through all the buildings and made sure that all the break rooms have been broken down. No break rooms for my staff. I'm following every procedure possible to make sure that everybody is safe at Veterans.
And Mr. Oliver, I'm not doubting you. I'm just concerned about them being in Vets because of the children that are in there. We have very vulnerable students, and that just concerns me. I didn't know that was going on. But I just didn't know, where are these people coming from? Did they just come from another school? You trained, say if you train a group of people, we'll say 2 or 3 people, and like you said, and then they go to the school. Are they ours now? They're ours. They're not going to another school.
They're working for us.
You can understand where I'm going with this. I'm talking about cross contamination.
I totally understand where you're going with it. They are totally dedicated to this district. We have built a plan with the outside company to make sure that they're designated for each building. The building that they're designated for, that's where they stay. They're not going to be moving anywhere else in the district except for they're going to be in that one building, and that is it.
So you feel it's safe that they're in with our most vulnerable? I'm just asking you. I know nothing's safe, but
exactly, Ms. Cobden. Nothing is safe, but I use every precaution to make sure that I protect everybody in this district at all times.
Okay, I just wanted to get that out because I didn't know that was going on, and it frightened me a little bit. Obviously, I'm very big on
Every precaution,
especially with those kids in that school.
Every precaution is being taken: PPE, rubber gloves, glass, face covering, we're taking every precaution.
And they're ours now. They're not gonna be out of school and then get.
With the
Okay.
Providence schools, Cranston schools are coming back to us. They are designated for the Warwick Public Schools, and that is it.
And how long, so does every school have extra custodians by this?
By November 1st, I'm hoping to have all the the end of November, have all the buildings staffed appropriately with all extra custodial staff that is necessary. Presently,
Okay, 'cause I know that some people feel like their schools are not completely covered yet. That's why that was my other question.
so presently, we have WISE staff that is working overtime to
Right.
to make sure that we do cover all the areas. My staff has been instructed to, if we do have a vacancy, that we find coverage for it to make sure that we have the additional disinfecting every building. I'm doing everything in my power to make sure that we're appropriately staffed in every building.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair?
Thank you. Ms. Cobden, you all set?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cornell?
Yeah, so I just would like to echo something Ms. Cobden mentioned regarding the communications, because I did not receive anything about the incident vets either. And that's really bothering to me because like we need to know what's going on in those schools. And I remember even asking administration, they promised to saying that if there any incidents happened, they would inform us. But evidently we haven't been made aware of all the situations. So in the future, like every single incident, we should be made aware of that.
Madam
And
Chair,
also,
Dr. Conley?
I just want to clarify, I'm not certain that the incident that you're speaking about occurred at vets. I'm not sure. We have had students that have needed to be quarantined because of exposures at home in their families. We've had exposures at vets as well. I just have to note that our stable pod grouping has been put together so well and followed so well at vets by the teachers and Mr. Haywood and Mr. Costa at vets that we've really minimized exposure and quarantine. So I'm not certain what incident you're speaking of, and maybe we should probably talk about it offline, but I just want to get clear. I just want to be clear that I'm not certain that this occurred at vets. We also have the CTC open, but we could talk about that.
Madam Chair,
Superintendent?
I would say we will certainly endeavor to do a better job, Mr. Cornell, of communication, but I would also just to remind the committee, oftentimes we'll get phone calls over the weekend of individual students who may test positive and their DL, and the committee wouldn't have a right to know that. So I wouldn't share that with you.
I don't even want to know. I don't think any of us want to know if they're DL and they've never stepped a foot in the schools to infect anyone or to put anybody at risk. I don't think we need to know about that. What we need to know about are situations that happen where staff or children or students come in with COVID or come in with symptoms, and then we have to quarantine people and we have to do all the research to determine who they've been in contact with and stuff like that. As far as DL, as far as people who have not stepped foot in our schools, it's none of our business. We don't need to know it. Why we need to know it? We need to know it because we get calls from people, believe it or not, and they're like, "Oh, did you hear about Sarah Joe? The teacher? Well, she has COVID, and she said that she didn't have any symptoms, but she did, and she came to school, and now we have to close down this school or this classroom or what have you, and all these people are being quarantined." So we don't need the community calling us up and saying, "Oh, do you know about this?" And then we're like totally flat-footed. And I think that's what Ms. Cobden was trying to say, and I think that's what Mr. Cornell. I mean, just tell us when it affects our kids, our students, our teachers, members of the staff, et cetera, who are in our schools, who may get infected or may be infected or who may infect other people or end up having quarantine or closed schools and things like that. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, just so that I think that the school committee knows, but I don't know if parents know, that all of these outside contractors who are coming in to our schools to clean and help out and disinfect and whatnot, they have all had background checks, correct, Kevin? BCIs, DCYF checks.
Yes, the federal.
That's all been done.
Federal and state BCI.
NCICs, so state, federal, and DCYF checks.
That's correct.
And I just want parents to know, even though these people are coming in, they've been looked at. They've had to go through the same background check that any employee has to go through when they come to work, even as a substitute here.
Madam Chair, may I wrap up my statement?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry we had to, go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, you pretty much said most of what I was going to say. I just don't want to be left in the dark. I just want to be informed, because as a school member, we're making important decisions affecting everyone, and we need to know what's going on. Like, we can't. And when a constituent emails me or calls me, like, and discusses an issue, like, I want to be informed about the issue so I can clarify the situation to them. Like, I just want to be informed. So if whatever situation happens, I'm asking administration, can you let us know? So we're not left in the dark. Superintendent Thornton?
As I said, we will certainly endeavor to do better. Also, my cell phone, 680-2381. Call me anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else, Superintendent, anybody? Okay. Future meetings. There will be a special school committee meeting next Tuesday, October 27th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Public session. There will be a school building subcommittee meeting on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020 at 7:30 a.m. That's election day. That's also a Tuesday. There will not be a special school committee meeting on election day. November 3rd, just so you know. So we will skip the special school committee meeting on November 3rd. We will have our regularly scheduled meeting on November 10th, a full business and an open public meeting. And then, oh, it already said that. November 10th, Tuesday, November 10th is our regularly scheduled monthly school committee meeting. I wish you all well. Stay safe. And Godspeed to all. Thank you. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Take care all.
Good night.